all the things I could be doing during summer break, swimming at the beach, traveling, or playing video games, I decided to torture myself by taking a math class over the summer. I was studying a material with a friend, and we actually had a decent time learning it along the way. Anyway, this midterm rolls around, and I take it. Don't think I do too well, but I held out hope for the best. A few days pass, my friend gets an email. Congratulations, he passed. Me, no email. A few more days pass, still no email, and now my anxiety is going through the roof. This is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I legitimately had nightmares over not passing this class. Nightmares over math, to reiterate. Why? I was scared. Scared of disappointing my parents, scared of disappointing myself, but most of all, I was scared of what my friend's reaction would be, what he would think of me if I didn't pass this class. Would he laugh? Would he make fun? I didn't know. You can imagine my relief when I finally get this test back and I pass, but it didn't make up for the amount of anxiety I had waiting up to that point. Not anxiety over the grade itself, what it could mean to someone else. The fact that my vision of self-worth, happiness, and success came from what someone else had to say about me stressed me out more than anything else. Depression and anxiety are skyrocketing for people aged 12 to 25 in a way it never really has before. 1 in 3 teenagers experience an anxiety disorder. More than 1 in 7 have experienced a major depressive episode in the past year. All of these numbers keep rising by the year as well. It can be very difficult to ask for help on such a stigmatized topic, which leads to 60% of all teenagers diagnosed with depression not seeking out help, partially as a result of how others will react and view them for it. Let's face it, no one wants to admit they're depressed in a world where they're taught to man up over everything. When the Pew Research Center asked students about the biggest problems they face in school, it found this: 70% of teenagers view anxiety and depression as a major problem, placing that in front of poverty, bullying, and more. So why are people so anxious? For most, they believe it's the extracurriculars and schoolwork we do, coupled with extensive procrastination. However, if you dig deeper into the concept of procrastination, it becomes more about an inherent fear of failing the assignment rather than the phone your mom is always talking about. The deadline here isn't even the problem. The fear of failure is. Nevertheless, what about failure makes it something to stress about? After all, as all our teachers say, a bad grade is simply a measure of your own performance. So clearly it should just be taken as that and nothing more, right? Well, for the majority of students, clearly not. If grades are really just perceived as learning for students, then everyone should react to their different grades with a growth mindset. However, the CDC has found a direct correlation between the quality of grades a student earns and their mental health. Students who score lower have a higher likelihood of feeling sad, hopeless, or seriously considering suicide. Why is this, though? What about grades makes people act like this? While correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation, there are a couple of reasons this could be the case. One of the biggest lies in hypercompetitiveness, a term defined by the Eastern Oregon University as an indiscriminate need to compete and win at all costs. The main reason this exists in school are the ever-present college admissions. The brutal part about college admissions is that it pits you against everyone, from your peers to your closest friends, to see who looks like a better fit for their campus. And this feeling of having to do better than everyone else starts to trickle into almost everything people do, sparking this enormous comparison of intelligence. I wasn't scared about passing or failing the math test I talked about in the beginning. I was scared about doing worse than someone else. As someone who was always quick to judge others for mistakes they made, I couldn't imagine someone else wouldn't. It wasn't about learning from my performance at all. It was just about making sure that I didn't do worse than someone else. And this is the feeling which draws people to make the comparisons about who is smart and who is dumb, as that's just what a bad grade or GPA just seems to mean, even if that isn't the truth. With feeling like you're not good enough for college, which many define as the only true way of success, many students drown their sorrows in a six-pack of beer or drugs, evident by how these activities are nearly 4 times as prevalent in students earning mostly D's and F's compared to students earning mostly A's. While correlation, once again, doesn't imply causation, with the various negative feelings that bad grades induce, along with how many students view substances as an escape from bad feelings, it makes sense that these two would provoke it. Regardless, since substance use only worsens your mental health, it becomes a vicious cycle, and some students just give up at this point, feeling that their bad grades only stand for the inability to live up to the standards of their friends, their dream college, and society as a whole. I drew an analogy for this situation. Obviously, I'm not doing a TED Talk on art, fortunately, but hopefully it should suffice. You can see yourself on the left, juggling all your activities, your schoolwork, a sport, and your free time. You can see others juggling similar but different activities. What you can't see is the mental tax it puts on people, trying to have all these activities juggled on their hands and not have one slip off. And when one eventually does slip off, what do? We laugh. We make fun. We take pleasure in a competitor messing up. Often, it doesn't matter if it's our friend or not. Often, it doesn't matter the reason. A struggle with substance use, a divorce. Often, we don't even know. All we see is someone who failed at their job of juggling and tie that failure to their entire personhood. This concept of rejecting mistakes is not just limited to the people around you. It is also not just limited to college admissions. A study conducted by UC Berkeley found that with men with college degrees, the callback rate was 50% lower if they had a criminal record compared to if they didn't. Despite a clear change in their behavior evident by that college degree, a mistake they made years ago follows them everywhere they go. And with so much of society believing that unemployment is synonymous with failure, this brings us right back to the same feelings that a high schooler would feel if they had a bad grade, which is partially why the rates of depression of the unemployed are much higher than most. So what's the solution? Is there a solution? After all, bad grades will always be kept to compare us to one another. But maybe we can live a little farther away from it. So I'm going to ask you all to remember this. Being someone who can act as a peer to help and not just someone to judge is more important than anything else. It's better to have empathy about how people think rather than just making an assumption about their intelligence. No one's self-worth can be defined by a letter on a transcript or a mistake they made years ago. And likewise, a college admissions letter shouldn't define success for everyone, even though much of society has taught us to think that way. We can understand the small steps we can take to help destigmatize bad grades can not only heal the mental health of our friends, but potentially across the world. If you yourself feel anxious, I encourage you to either talk to a therapist or to your closest friends. Talking to people instead of just bottling up your mistakes makes you feel more like a human and less like a competitor. And if other people hear your thoughts and your faults, they will be more inclined to share their own. Creating an environment where failures are collectively shared not only destigmatizes them, but also helps them be solved, as a group effort is always better than a singular one. Together, we can create a future where a bad grade isn't a blockade to success. It can be a real catalyst to real learning and change. And with this, with one person at a time, we can figure out just how to learn from each other again. Thank you.